Hey there, and welcome back to another Rise of the Guardians video. And today we're going to take one last walk down memory lane to complete this little series of unveiling the backstories of the various different characters in the Rise of the Guardians franchise. Or at least those characters that ended up making an appearance in the films, and talking through how those story points would have been very useful source material for prequels or spin-offs or whatever. And so, we started off our journey by talking through the backstory of Pitch Black, a kind of two-dimensional villain in the film, but in his expanded backstory within the book first, well, he isn't unredeemable. He's far more sympathetic. He was a glorious hero who was forcibly turned to evil, and it really wasn't his fault at first. We then talked about Santa, and how he was an outlaw who discovered the wonder in everything after he arrived at the village of Sandtof Clausen and was integrated into the community. And this took us to Easter Bunnymun's story, aka the Easter Bunny, and we learned that he was in fact an alien. The last remnant of a species that was all but wiped from existence by Pitch Black, and who now acts as one of the Earth's most stalwart protectors. And he was the first one that really felt like it diverged from the films in a major way. And honestly, for me, it worked a lot better. He was weird and he was quirky and cheeky, as opposed to gruff and rude. And it made him an altogether more likable character, and pretty much unrecognizable as well. We then moved on to the Tooth Fairy, Toothiana, who's a half fairy, half human, and whose parents were murdered by an angry monkey that used to keep her father as a slave. And then the monkey wiped out the rest of her maternal family, leaving her all alone collecting teeth forever. And this led us to Sandman, who in all honesty never really changes that much. His origin is a tiny little man flying around on a shooting star to grant wishes to people he flies past. And he also ends up befriending Pitch Black's long-lost daughter. And then also the Man in the Moon. And speaking of the Man in the Moon, he was the most recent character we explored, and how he was intergalactic royalty until Pitch Black decided to be a major buzzkill and ruin his entire life, killing off his parents and separating him from his best friend and protector for years. And so now that we've worked our way through all those characters, there really isn't all that much to do besides walk our way through the backstory of the main character, the protagonist of the film, probably the most popular character within the fandom itself, Jack Frost. And so, when we meet Jack Frost for the first time in the Rise of the Guardians film, he's portrayed as the kindly trickster, somebody who loves pranks and fun and adventure, but who's also very caring about the people around him. But someone who's also deeply lonely and resentful that he can't be seen by any regular humans and has to live life on his own. And after the return of Pitch Black, the Man in the Moon, who originally empowered Jack in the first place, selects him to be a new Guardian. And so, off he goes with the other Guardians, seeking to ensure that children continue to believe, and all the while, he continues to search for his own path, his own centre on which he should base his life, to try and figure out who he is at his core. And so, to do this, he kind of ends up abandoning his new friends in order to get his hands on his set of baby teeth, which in turn allows him to unlock his memories and causes him to remember that he was once a human, with a life, a family, a little sister. A sister that he sacrificed his life to protect. And thus, he started to realize what he wanted his life as a Guardian to be all about. Fun. And thus, he saves the day and guides the others into defeating Pitch Black, and everything was right in the world. And that was where we left off. He got the most development, the most screen time, and the most important storyline. His arc was pivotal to the narrative of the film, and it was well written and fun and engaging. And so, it was probably the story that people most wanted to see a follow-up for. His character was the one that most people wanted to see continue in the future, whether that be in the form of prequels or sequels or spin-offs, and obviously it didn't happen. And at this point, if it ever did happen, it would probably be in the form of a reboot with a recast and all of that, so that's a bit sad, but because of this, the lack of story for Jack Frost left me, and probably a lot of other fans, a bit bereft, a bit lacking for story, and yearning for something more. And so, when the books started releasing to fill that gap, it was a relief, but also a bit of a surprise the further you got along. Because whilst you can sort of squint and imagine the other Guardians do match up slightly with their film counterparts, Jack Frost's storyline and backstory, I would argue, is completely different, and is only somewhat loosely connected in the fact that at one point, they both had amnesia, and they end up with the same name and powers. But with that being said, let's start breaking down the storyline. And this storyline runs across basically every book in the series, so I'm obviously not going to give you a word-for-word transcript, just the basic bones of the story. So if you like what you're hearing, I'd definitely go consider going out and buying the books by William Joyce. They're worth it. So, Jack Frost's storyline in the books starts off far earlier than his actual character of Jack Frost. Because before he was Jack Frost, he was a character called Nightlight, a boy made of pure light energy, and he was in service to the Lunanoff family, protecting their young son, who would eventually grow up to become the Man in the Moon. He was very close to the little baby and would sing him to sleep and watch over him at all times. And this was what he continued to do for years until Pitch decided that he wanted to destroy this happy family and came after them, where they'd engage in an epic battle above Earth. And the Tsar and the Tsarina were defeated, leaving Nightlight to fight Pitch alone. And of course, since he is the hero of the story, he wins by stabbing Pitch in the heart with a dagger formed from Little Man in the Moon's tears. But unfortunately, the resulting explosion wipes out the royal family except for the Man in the Moon and knocks Pitch Black down to Earth, trapping him in a cave, whilst Nightlight gets trapped inside Pitch's heart via the dagger. So yeah, that would kind of suck. And then, no one sees him for a decent amount of time as the world moves on and the Man in the Moon grows to adulthood, until a moonbeam accidentally wakes up both Pitch and Nightlight at the start of Nicholas St. North and the Battle of the Nightmare King, which is the first chapter book in the series. Except at this stage of the game, Nightlight no longer has his memories, and so off he goes to wander the world and act as one of the Guardians, which is pretty much his storyline throughout the majority of the series. Oh, and he gets the hots for Catherine, aka Mother Goose, who's also a youngster like him when they first meet. And then, during the Sandman chapter book, he kisses her to save her, which turns her immortal and stops her aging past her 20s, and that's a bit contrived, but I'll allow it. And this turns him into a real boy, and he also doesn't age past his 20s. But then he has an existential crisis and buggers off, for quite a while. Pretty sure it's like at least 100 years. And he doesn't really interact with the others until about 1933, I think it is, when they all reunite to fight against Pitch Black for the final time. Now, since that's the final chapter book in the series, I don't think I'm going to go into too much depth beyond that. It's one thing to spoil all the lead-in novels, which I've already done, but I think it would be pretty bad form to spoil the end of the franchise. But I'm not completely unfair. So if you want to know more, on the Guardians wiki there's a full plot synopsis for the book on its wiki entry. So if you want to go there, go nuts. But anyway, of all the characters that could have carried the future of the franchise, it's clear Jack Frost is the number one. From mystical protector of the Man in the Moon, to being trapped inside Pitch Black's dark heart, to wandering the world with amnesia, to falling in love and becoming a human, and then finally becoming Jack Frost, his storyline, even if it had to be altered slightly to fit with the movie canon, would have been a really great story to tell. And so even though the franchise is currently dead in the water, I do hope that one day the company will pick up the torch and give it a second attempt, or at least pass it on to someone new. The first movie was good. It was just maybe released at the wrong time, and maybe it was the wrong format. I think a show would suit it much better, or a streaming movie. But anyway, with all that being said, those are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think about Jack Frost's backstory? You like it? Hate it? Think it's better than the film version? Would it make for a good reboot storyline? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.